Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be reading Mr. Toby's Harvest Home by Marta Kočì. Let's begin. It was harvest time, but all the farmers were sitting in the village pub. Usually they worked very hard at harvest time, but not this year. This year they were waiting for Mr. Toby to come and reap the corn with his combine harvester. They had heard it was a wonderful machine. It cut the corn, beat out the grain, tied the straw in bundles, and poured out the flour into sacks. All the farmers sat in the pub and talked about Mr. Toby's harvester. The village children stood at the door, listening wide-eyed. Every now and then they ran back to the roadside to see if the machine was coming. The farmers didn't mind waiting. They just called for more beer and packs of cards. Mr. Toby didn't come that day, or the next, or the next. At last, the farmers grew tired of waiting. Grumbling, they threw down their cards, pushed aside their beer mugs, and went out to the fields. The corn was now very ripe, and they all had to help each other to gather it in quickly before it began to rot. Everyone worked very hard. Their little tractors chugged up and down the fields from morning till night. And as they worked together, the farmers began to sing happy harvesting songs. Then, suddenly, they heard a rattling noise and then saw a puff of smoke. Over the brow of the hill rolled a monster machine, and peering down from the top was a little man. It was Mr. Toby. "Hello, everyone," he said, but no one answered. They had never seen such a huge monster. "I'm sorry I'm late," said Mr. Toby, "but I've had terrible hay fever." "That's too bad," shouted the farmers. "We've had to do all the work ourselves." Mr. Toby felt really sorry for himself. "I couldn't help it," he grumbled. "Hay fever's not much fun, you know." But the farmers didn't care. They just went back to the pub for another game of cards. Only the children felt sorry for Mr. Toby. They tucked him warmly in bed and brought him honey and fruit and cups of tea. Mr. Toby began to feel a little better. "You children are good nurses," he said, and the children felt very proud of themselves. They liked Mr. Toby a lot. He liked them too. "I wish you could all stay here with me," he murmured. But winter was coming, and he knew he would have to leave them soon. The days became shorter and the nights colder. Mr. Toby stood in the empty fields and looked up at the crows flying overhead. "I'm just like them," he thought. "I have no home to go to either." He looked at his combine harvester. It was no use to him all winter. Then he had an idea. The next morning, Mr. Toby got out his toolbox. He sawed and hammered and glued and nailed until he had turned the inside of his harvesting machine into a cozy living room. The children came to watch. They saw that Mr. Toby had no furniture for his new home, so they whispered to each other and then hurried down to the village. When they came back, they were carrying old mattresses, sheets, chairs, anything they had been able to beg from their parents. Then Mr. Toby built a kitchen stove from bits of pipe which he didn't need anymore, and the children ran down to the village to fetch him pots and pans. Mr. Toby was happy. His new home was ready. "Now you can all come and stay with me," he said to the children. First, Mr. Toby cooked a huge meal, and then he made the children. He and the children huddled round the stove and watched the smoke puffing out of the chimney. He knew that when winter came, he would be warm and cosy. Winter came. The children spent most of their time with Mr. Toby. They brought him carrots and potatoes and cabbages to cook, and sometimes sweet, juicy apples. Mr. Toby was a very good cook, and when he wasn't cooking, he told the children stories. In March, the farmers started work again. They helped each other in to plough and sow. Mr. Toby could see that they were enjoying themselves. Now that they've started working together, they've become good friends. But summer crept nearer, and Mr. Toby thought about his combine harvester. Who's going to reap the corn, he wondered, and how much longer are they going to let me live in this field? At harvest time, the farmers came to see Mr. Toby. "Would you like to help us with the harvest?" they said. Mr. Toby pointed to his machine, but the farmers shook their heads. "That's all right," they said. "We need you, not that monster." Then Mr. Toby pointed to a sign at the gate of the field which said, "No travelling folk allowed." "I thought you would be telling me to move on soon," he said. Then one of the children had an idea. "We'd like you to stay here forever," he said. "So why don't you take the wheels off your machine? Then you won't be a traveller anymore." The children helped Mr. Toby to remove the wheels and put a garden fence all around the harvester. One of the children painted a sign to hang over the door. Now Mr. Toby had a real home at last, where he could live forever with his new friends. The end. Thank you for listening. See you next time.